Small group leaders, welcome to week 2 of our time together in the book of Judges. We are walking our way through this book that is going to be wild. There's going to be some crazy stories coming, and in this lesson, particularly here in week 2, we start to see the chaos unfold. Because what we see here is that Joshua, the great military leader, the man who loved the Lord, the man who was loved by the Lord, the man who was a fantastic leader, was a fantastic lover of God. He is going to die. He has led Israel well. He led them into the Promised Land through the conquest, across the River Jordan into the Promised Land. Though he failed to drive out the Canaanites like God had asked him to do, still he had found favor with the Lord, and he shared the story of God's faithfulness to everyone around him. But when he dies, what we find out in this passage today, we're going to be in chapter 2, verses 8 through 19, that when Joshua dies, he actually doesn't, the faith doesn't carry on. We're told in this passage that there is a generation who did not know the Lord or the works that he had done on their behalf. So an entire generation, an entire people have been raised up not knowing anything about God, not knowing anything about Yahweh, nothing about the covenant that God had made with Abraham, nothing about the covenant God had made with Moses, nothing about the covenant that God had made as they even entered into the land that they are now dwelling, where they're living in these houses, where they're eating this great food. They had forgotten how they got there. They weren't giving its proper weight. They weren't giving glory to God for what they have done. And so they're now here in this land. Joshua has died, and an entire generation doesn't know the Lord. And so Israel becomes unfaithful. And this is where we get actually the thesis statement for the entire book of Judges. It comes in this chapter. It's this phrase. You're going to hear this over and over and over again. This is the whole book of Judges wrapped up in one sentence. We're told this: everyone did what was right in their own eyes. There was no law. Everyone just kind of went into business for themselves. Everyone did what they wanted to do. This is expressive individualism run amok. Israel had done what was right in their own eyes. Whatever they felt like their heart wanted them to do, they just went ahead and did it. And that's why we see chaos devolve, because they did not surrender to Jesus. They did not surrender to the Lord and his commands on how he wanted them to live in the Promised Land, on how they were to relate with one another. And because of this, their unfaithfulness is on full display. And it comes in the form of worshiping and actually bowing down to the Canaanite gods, to the Baals and the Ashtaroths, we're told. Who are the Baals and the Ashtaroths? Baal was the local pagan god who was in charge of the weather. That's kind of what they thought he did, which meant that rain, as Luke Bryan says, is a good thing. So when rain comes, the crops grow. They're able to make money. When they have money, they have security. When they have security, they have power. Baal promised security and power and wealth. Ashtaroth was the fertility goddess. She was the one that they thought were responsible for making sure that the women were fertile and that they would be fruitful, that they would have kids. Because kids were so important to this, right? This whole agrarian society in which you had to have kids who could work the land. Ashtaroth was the god of sex. You had the god of money in Baal. You had the god of sex in Ashtaroth. We've been worshiping sex and money from long before we ever entered any current state of what America is in. Any current state of what the world is in. This is as old as time. And so Israel has fallen victim. They have fallen victim to their own devices, victims of their own doing. They did what was right in their own eyes. What they saw to be right in their own eyes was to do what the Canaanites did. Right? The Canaanites were powerful. The Canaanites were successful. Look at this great land that they had. Look at all this money they had. So we're just going to do what they did. They had forgotten God. It's the beginning of all of this. It's all going to unravel from this point. And what God is going to do from now on is that every time Israel falls into their disobedience, right? There's consequences for that. Israel's going to cry out for help because of the judgment brought on them from their disobedience. God's going to hear that. He's going to raise up a judge. And then there's going to be peace in the land again. Now, when we think of judge, don't think of what we think of a judge, right? Judge Judy wearing a robe, hitting a gavel. That's not what a judge is. A judge is a military commander. A judge is a Navy SEAL. Think Jack Ryan. Think James Reese. This is what a judge, think Jason Bourne. Think of a military commander who is crafty, who is smart. That's what God's going to do. He's going to raise up someone who's going to bring Israel out of their mess. He's going to bring blessing upon them. They're going to have peace. That judge is going to die. Then they're going to fall into chaos again. That is the cycle of judges. Disobedience, judgment, crying out, deliverance, back to disobedience. That's what's going to happen all the time. So that's where we are here in week 2. Week 2 rather, Judges chapter 2, the second part. We're going to see the chaos unfold. Again, if you have any questions, reach out to the discipleship director at your campus, reach out to me, reach out to your pastors. We're happy to help. Enjoy week 2 together.